Breaking news. Putin is counting on the African Union to join the G20 in September. Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated that his country is prepared to assist in bolstering African countries' sovereignty and aid in making Africa a key partner in the new system of the multipolar world order. In a statement released on Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the G20 will decide whether or not to admit the African Union as a full member at their September summit in New Delhi. During a meeting with Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros, Moussa Faki Mahamat, chairperson of the African Union Commission, and Putin, the three leaders discussed the situation in Africa. At the trilateral meeting, Putin declared that Russia stands ready to assist in bolstering the sovereignty of African countries and in making Africa a key partner in the new system of the multipolar world order. We encourage the Union to participate in the activities of major international organizations. Before you took office, the President of Senegal proposed giving the African Union full membership in the G20. Russia was among the first countries to respond favorably to this proposal. Putin stated his expectation that the decision would be approved at the G20 summit in New Delhi in September. The summit, which begins today, will focus heavily on these issues. In addition, we will discuss concrete steps toward bolstering trade and economic cooperation, guaranteeing food and energy security, and advancing national healthcare systems, he added. Putin noted that mutual trade had increased by nearly 35% in the first half of 2023, reaching approximately $18 billion, despite the coronavirus and the illegal sanctions imposed against Russia. Our partnership with the Union of the Comoros is very important to us. They have the potential to grow in a number of areas because they are founded on respect and a balancing of interests. The Russian president continued, "Of course, we are open to cooperation with your country in any and all areas." The chairperson of the African Union remarked in the meeting that Russia is a crucial ally for Africa. Assoumani said, "A friend in need is a friend indeed, and in times of need, Russia has always stood with Africa regardless of the problems that arose, including its struggle for independence. Russia has been there for Africa through thick and thin," he added. Ukraine has resumed armored attacks against heavily fortified trenches as part of a new offensive phase in the US-NATO war against Russia. According to the New York Times, the main thrust of Ukraine's nearly two-month-old counteroffensive is now underway. This is based on statements made by U.S. officials. This Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said, "I can confirm that hostilities have intensified in a significant way," adding that a large number of Ukrainian armored vehicles were used, resulting in heavy losses. Ukrainian conscripts are once again being thrown into heavily defended front lines, where they are dying by the thousands in minefields and trenches, after a bloody debacle in the first phase of the offensive temporarily halted Ukrainian attacks. Ukraine has lost countless lives, and the only reason the conflict persists is because NATO is providing it with a massive arsenal. Ukraine has made some incremental gains along the vast front, but this has only been possible at the expense of many lives. The deaths of Ukrainians serve no purpose other than to further the goals of imperialist powers. NATO members have pledged to deploy tens of thousands of troops to Russia's western borders and to massively increase military spending to finance the conflict with Russia and China, which has led to the latest escalation. In spite of mounting public opposition in Ukraine, Zelensky was given strict orders to press on with the offensive at the summit. The U.S. media had been touting the spring offensive as a turning point in the war that would deliver a crushing defeat for Russian forces for months. But the fiasco has been so massive that even the U.S. media, after remaining silent for weeks, has finally admitted that it's a catastrophe. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that, when Ukraine launched its big counteroffensive this spring, Western military officials knew Kyiv didn't have all the training or weapons that it needed to dislodge Russian forces. But they had faith that the Ukrainians' bravery and ingenuity would ultimately prevail. Not yet, anyway. The Ukrainian military's advances have been stymied by Russian air power, extensive fortifications, and minefields. Even more bluntly, the New York Times published an article about the scandal that was subsequently buried and heavily edited. According to the article, one Ukrainian unit suffered a 200% casualty rate, with every single member being killed or wounded. They were then replaced by fresh recruits, who also suffered the same fate. It talked about how many young soldiers were being killed, and how replacements were often older recruits who were forced into action. A large portion of Ukraine's entire able-bodied population is armed and fighting because of the country's strict mandatory military service law. The United States and other NATO powers are calling the shots in this war, and they intend to keep the bodies piling up. The Economist reported on Thursday, the Ukrainian army commits new forces in a big southward push, that some American and European military officials argue that Ukrainian commanders have in fact been too slow to strike with their new brigades, a mistake that they think Ukraine committed last year in Kherson. United States Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley was quoted as saying, "The various wargames that were done ahead of time have predicted certain levels of advance, but that has slowed down." To meet the demands of the imperialist powers, the Ukrainian generals have decided to throw in fresh legs, a euphemism for sending young and old Ukrainian soldiers to their deaths. Pretending that the United States is fighting in the name of democracy is becoming increasingly untenable as the war wears on. Vice President Joe Biden met with Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, on Thursday. Italy and the United States are also standing strong with Ukraine, Biden said. "I compliment you on your very strong support in defending against Russian atrocities, and that's what they are." The Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini is a hero of Meloni's, who famously said, "I think Mussolini was a good politician, and everything he did for Italy." After the conclusion of the NATO summit earlier this month, Vice President Joe Biden made the following statement: "Our commitment to Ukraine will not weaken. We will continue to fight for freedom and individual rights no matter how long it takes. Liberty in Ukraine and freedom in Italy through collaboration with fascists." This dedication to indefinite warfare will inevitably lead to escalation. Reuters reported on Thursday that the United States would begin sending M1 Abrams main battle tanks to Ukraine in August and September, with F-16 fighter jets following by the end of the year. This is the end result of a year of escalating measures taken by the United States. Bradley armored fighting vehicles were announced to be sent to Ukraine at the start of the year, and main battle tanks followed shortly after. The United States promised to send F-16 fighter jets and cluster bombs in May. There are likely hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers from NATO countries, along with hundreds of active-duty U.S. and NATO military and intelligence personnel, according to leaked Pentagon documents made public earlier this year. On Wednesday, the Biden administration gave the green light for the United States to start delivering evidence to the International Criminal Court in order to bring Putin to justice. The United States, which has killed millions of people in criminal wars of aggression, has finally decided to accept the court's jurisdiction after much internal debate. The White House, however, has decided to press charges in an effort to escalate the military conflict. If Russia were to suffer a military defeat, the United States would likely pursue criminal charges against Putin. The United States has always been against a negotiated settlement, which is why they're taking this step now. The United States is set on defeating Russia strategically before making any moves to dominate and subjugate China. The latest offensive is a disaster for the people of Ukraine, Russia, and the rest of the world. If the offensive continues to fail, thousands upon thousands of Ukrainian conscripts will be killed at the front lines. The political pressure on the Russian government to escalate through the use of nuclear weapons would be enormous if Ukraine were to break the Russian front line and drive through to cut off the Crimean Peninsula. Hundreds of thousands of people have already been killed in this war, and it must end immediately. In tandem with the intensification of hostilities, a worldwide wave of strikes has broken out, affecting everyone from dock workers in Canada to actors and screenwriters in the United States to the impending conflicts at UPS, Yellow Freight, and the North American automobile industry. The growing movement of workers defending their social rights must be joined with the struggle against war and militarism.